All right, what is up, guys? VV back with another video. Excuse me. And today we're going to be going over part 3 of 7 of the Taking Your Game to the Next Level series we're doing. So let's go ahead and dive straight into it. We'll get straight to it here. So Gear Theory, part 3 of 7, Form 3, Sorisu. All right, so y'all already know the introduction. This is for educational purposes. Just want to help out the newer players get better, help the average and intermediate level players get to the next level, and the expert players. If you guys want to leave some 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 insights in the comment section below, by all means do so. And while this series will be focusing on the One Piece TCG, most of the concepts and ideas covered in this video will be applicable to all TCGs. Okay, especially in Gears 3, 4, and 5 we're about to go over. So, all right, let's go ahead and hop straight into this. So we've already done Gears 1 and 2. We won't spend much time on Gears 1 and 2, but those are definitely important. Those are the building blocks on which Gears 3 through 5 are built, right? That you like, in other words, you can't even go into Gears 3, 4, and 5, or 6 or 7 for that matter, until you have established some type of knowledge of the game and some type of experience in the game. Excuse me. So Gears 1 and 2 go together as building blocks to allow you to develop your game style, your own style. And that's what Gears 3, 4, and 5 are, is whatever style you are. And we'll go into that in a second. And then Gears 6 and 7, you use those once you've gotten some type of understanding of Gears 3, 4, and 5, so that you could take yourself to the final form, so to speak, to your ultimate, to the ultimate form. Excuse me. So Gears 3, 4, and 5, we do have to talk about some things real quickly. We're going to be talking about mid-range, aggro, and control. This is the balance triad of, game design. The entire game roughly is built around this concept. There are some in-betweeners, but we're going to talk about the general concepts since we're just trying to, get some ideas out there. So, real quick, Gear 3 is about development and balance. That is your mid-range deck. Gear 4 is about production, outproducing your opponent, and that's aggro. We'll talk about that in Gear 4 in more detail. And then Gear 5 is managing what's going on the board and making it to the late game. That's your control deck. So, quick summary: mid-range is mid-game dominant, aggro is early game dominant, and control is late game dominant. Okay, now why am I doing mid-range first? Why would I do mid-range first instead of early game aggro first? Mid-range is probably one of the best learning decks, or one of the best decks you can learn, or game styles, ways of playing the game that you can learn. Okay, it's one of the best ways to learn the game. So let's go ahead and dive into that. And don't worry, aggro's right around the corner. It's in the next video. Okay, so let's talk about Gear 3, development, balance, tempo, and transitioning into the mid-game. For the beginning players, this is the early steps here. Why do cards have the stats they do, right? Why do they have the rarities they do? So rarity we won't talk too much about. That's probably its own video, but that kind of has a lot to do with the cost of the character and the effect it has. Okay, so I'll just leave that there. That could be its entire own. Most of these questions could be their own video, by the way. But I'm going to try and at least knock out the basic premise and how it ties back into learning about development and developing your board. Okay, when should I play my cards and why? Right. Oh, excuse me. I skipped it. Why do cards have the stats that they have? So I believe I've done an entire video on this. You'll have to search through my older videos if you want to see a breakdown of it. But just to do a long story short TLDR version here. Notice Sanji on the far left. Notice how he's a 1-cost 3,000 power character with a 1,000 counter on him and no effect. He doesn't have any special ability on the card. It's just a vanilla character. As vanilla meaning generic, as in it's just a basic card that has no special ability. And so is Kingdu, by the way. Kingdu is a 5-cost 7,000 power character with 1,000 counter. But there is one benefit of being a vanilla character, and that is you have the highest power you can get for that cost, unless you start dealing with special abilities or something. So in other words, a 5-cost character will not have more than 7,000 power. And typically speaking, a 5-cost character will not even have 7,000 power if it has a special effect baked into it or cooked into it. For example, Vista here in the middle left here, he's a 3-cost, 3,000 power character. Well, wait a minute. Sanji is a 1-cost, 3,000 power character. Why would I even want to play Vista? They both have 1,000 counter. Well, Vista has an effect that makes him a little stronger. So, you know, and I'm not going to go into details on the effects, but just know that's what helps balance the cost of characters. That's what interprets their value, if that makes sense. Okay, so next up is, when should I play my cards and why? Let me just put that into these next two questions, because they actually just answer it better by answering these next two. What does the term tempo mean, and what does it mean to play on curve? Notice I kind of reworded it a little bit. So let me explain playing on curve first. So say this is your opening hand of Sanji, Vista, King Du, Ace, and Newgate. Well, in One Piece TCG, you start off either, if you go first, you are on the odd curve. If you go second, you're on the even curve. So in other words, if you're going first, you'll have 1 resource on turn 1, you'll have 3 resources on turn 2, 5 on 3, 7 on 4, and 9 on 5. And then you'll have 10 on 6. And then likewise, with the even curve, on turn 1 you'll have 2 Dawn, and then 4, and then 6, then 8, then 10. You go on the even curve. So if this is my starting hand, I can go turn 1 Sanji, turn 2 Vista, turn 3 King Du, turn 4 Ace, and turn 5 Newgate. That's a very strong thing to do. It establishes a tempo. Because I played everything on curve, I played the highest value card that I could every single turn. That created a tempo that if my opponent cannot match that tempo, then I'll just run him over, because I have outdeveloped him on the board. Okay, and there are ways to get around that, of course, with removal events and things like this. It's not just, you know, that simple. But you guys get the concept there, where I might just develop a curve, or I might just develop my board so well from just a very generic curve that my opponent can't keep up with me, and so I outdevelop him. Okay, and if I want to have a curve, if I want to even have excuse me, if I want to even have the ability to have access to a curve like that, I need a balanced deck, right? I need a very balanced deck. Okay, so real quick, what does it mean to swing tall versus wide? These are concepts that beginner players need to know. They need to understand this. So swinging tall would be like with Edward Newgate. Notice how he's a 9-cost, 10,000 power character. And he has a very powerful effect as well. Again, we're not going to go into the effects, but just know he has a very powerful effect. Well, it costs 9 Dawn to play him. Again, let's use the example where this is my hand. Well, if this is my hand, and I have 9 Dawn available, well, I can play Edward Newgate, or I could play King Du, Vista, and Sanji. Well, you see what's going on there. Sanji, Vista, and King Du, if I played all 3 of them at one time, that would be me going wide, as opposed to me just playing Newgate and going tall. Okay, so just to be more clear, mid-range players will typically favor the tall route because they want to establish the most cost-efficient body as possible each turn. Now, you can't always do that, but that is the ideal, if that makes sense. Okay, and then the final concept I want to talk about for the beginner is slow and steady wins the race, is the concept here. So if that doesn't resonate with you, Gear 3 might not be your favorite, okay? Now, you still need to learn about these concepts, whether you want to go to Gear 4 or Gear 5 or wherever. You still need to understand these basic beginner concepts to move forward and to progress forward in the game. Okay, now chiming off of that slow and steady wins the race idea, let's talk about intermediate, where we really get into the concept of quality over quantity. Gear 3 is about quality over quantity, whereas Gear 4 is the opposite, quantity over quality, okay? And again, this has to do with swinging tall versus swinging wide. So when it comes to the characters that we have, a Gear 3, a player who really resonates with Gear 3, they're going to want high-value characters. They want high-quality characters. Whereas, and with high-quality characters comes high-quality attacks, right? Like with Smoker, that's a 5-cost, 7,000 power character that has a double attack. 7,000 power is a very special number, which we'll talk more about in Gear 4, that reaches a certain damage threshold. Again, that's in Gear 4, so hang tight. Okay, Krieg has double attack as well. Now, here's the thing. For Gear 4, again, I don't mean to go into it too much, but you're going to want to swing, wider and with a higher quantity, but you're going to have a lower quality of character, typically speaking. But Gear 3 is about out-developing your opponent. I want to get bigger, better characters. Okay, so don't think that it ends at the mid-game. You will typically a mid-range deck will still have a few 8, 9, or 10 cost characters scattered throughout it to help finish out the curve and to transition into the late game. Okay, so real quick to go into intermediate here. This is, we talked about, I'm going to back up for this. We talked about this already a little bit. Once you've understood the basic concept, the beginner concepts of what Gear 3 envelops, then you start going into the more advanced concept, but it's still an intermediate concept, of the rock, paper, scissors triad. And that's what the mid-range aggro and control triad, it's the same thing. It's the same idea. Okay, so long story short, for the intermediate player, it's all about, if you want to get, how do I say this? You're going to choose Gear 3, 4, or 5. That's the long story short. I'm sorry this is a little bit clumsy, guys, but I don't want to waste anyone's time. You're going to choose, okay, I want to go mid-range aggro or control. You're going to choose that. Now, like I said, you need to understand the beginner concepts of 3, 4, and 5 for each one of these. I'll have beginner concepts that are just good at making you better at the game. Like they're just general knowledge and information that resonates with that archetype that will make you better at the game. Okay? But for the players who are looking to get to, for the players who want to get better at mid-range, if that's your style, well, these are very strong cards and considerations for you to like take into consideration what they do. Borsalino is not just a blocker. It is also a card with high resilience. Same thing with Smoker. It's not just a double attack. It cannot be KO'd by effects. It can only be KO'd in battle. So you have ways of protecting it. Charlotte Perispero. We don't care if this card gets KO'd, so we're more than happy to just smash away with it, because if they do KO it, we get a card from it. Krieg KOs when it comes into play, and now it's a huge body with double attack until you deal with it. And then last but not least over here is Marco. Just a very strong character as well. High resilience, has a KO effect on play, has a counter on it, and is a 5-cost 6,000 power character. So this is what it is to be mid-range. Now, that's not to say you won't see any of these cards in an aggro or a control list, but these cards really embody what it is to be, part of a mid-range core, okay, for whatever color you're playing. So last but not least is taking your game into the expert level. Well, guess what? That only comes with expertise. That only comes with experience. The only way you can achieve the expert level of any of these 3 gears that we're talking about, Gear 3, 4, and 5, development, production, management, mid-range, aggro, control, whatever you want to call it, you have to put in the time. This doubles over into your Gear 2 experience, of course, but the big idea here is you're going to have to play against multiple different decks, multiple different times to see what works against each deck. So just to give an idea of a very good mid-range deck that is at the highest level of the game, something that can help you, give you ideas on how to make your own deck, check out this list here from this guy named Carlos Bredi. He got first place in in a OP04 regional, online regional, he went 9-0 with this list. 9-0. So you know the deck is good. You know the pilot's good. And this list, I would say, is a very strong mid-range deck. It has balance in the curve, where it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7, 8 taken care of. It doesn't have a 6 drop. That'd be nice if it had a 6 drop. And it'd be nice if it had a 9 or a 10 drop to close out the game. But you can see very clearly that it doesn't need that. It obviously didn't need it. It went 9-0. Okay. And with this style of deck, it has lots of searcher potential. We're not going to go through all the cards and everything about it. But again, just notice the distribution, the balance in cards. It's got 8 1-drops. It has 8 2-drops. It has 11 3-drops, but 3 are 2K counters. It has 8 4-drops, only 3 5-drops, 3 5-drops, 4 7-drops, and 2 8-drops. So it's built very low to the ground, similar to how an aggro deck would be. However, look how it transitions into the mid-game with cards like Luffy and cards like Brook. So this is one of the decks where you could argue like, oh, well, it's kind of more on the aggro side of it. Well, not entirely, but someone could make that argument. Whereas this next list we're going to look at, I would say this is a very true to style mid-range list. Now, it only got second place, but it went 8-1 in an online regional. I think it was the exact same online regional as this one here. I could be wrong about that. I'm sorry if I'm wrong about that. So with this list here, again, you have a very strong curve, especially the odd curve, where it will go Charlotte Pudding here. Sorry if you can't see my mouse very well. It'll go Charlotte Pudding, into Pero Sparrow, into Randolph, and into Charlotte Linlin, the 7 cost. And then later in the game, for your 8 and 10 cost, basically Katakuri ends up being the 9 cost character in this deck, where you can attach 1 Dawn to your leader and swing for 7, and play a Charlotte Katakuri for 8, and, do whatever you need to from there. And then its final boss monster is the Charlotte Linlin, which is just a very powerful card. Not going to go into the effects, but it is very powerful. Okay, so again, and then the even curve is not nearly as good, but listen to this. There's something you do need to consider. Leaders are very important. And here's, we probably won't talk a lot about leaders in these videos, but leaders determine a lot for the deck. Excuse me. So for example, if we're on the even curve with this deck, we actually play the exact same way that I just said, except one thing changes each turn. On turn 1, instead of just playing, a Charlotte Pudding, we'll have the Charlotte Pudding and then, or a Sanji, right? Like you could play the Charlotte Pudding, or you could play the Sanji. On turn 2, when we have 4 Dawn, you could play Sanji, the 4 call Sanji. Sorry for the confusion. They're both named that. But then, or you could play the Charlotte Paris Sparrow while still attacking for 7 with your Katakuri leader. Same idea for turn 3, where you have 6 Dawn. You could play your 5 drop and have 1 Dawn remaining for your leader's effect. You see what's going on there. Then it's the same thing on turn 4, and then turn 5 is Katakuri. Turn 6 is excuse me. It would be turn 4 turn 4 Katakuri, turn 5 Charlotte Linlin. Sorry about the confusion there. So hopefully that makes sense, and I'm sorry that the expert level is not more of what people might have wanted to read, where it's more specific details. But the truth of the matter is this: you can only teach someone so much, and I use this example when I'm teaching kids in art. Okay, when I'm trying to teach someone, and some kids are like, well, I can't draw like so-and-so. I can't draw like that. Okay, well, that's okay. You can still get to like a good level, like an intermediate level. And the truth is, when it comes to the expert level, or like the highest echelons of whatever we're talking about, the highest level, however you say that, of achievement in whatever we're talking about, whether it be games, art, or your job, there are certain limitations. There just are, right? No matter how good I get at basketball, I'll never be 7'1". Okay, like I could become a very good shooter like Steph Curry or something, right? But I'll never be I'll never be 6'3", right? Because I'm only 5'11", right? 5'10", 5'11". So I'll never be 6'3". So you see what I'm saying? There are limitations. And the same thing is true for card games, but I would say to a lesser extent. If you put in enough time, you can reach these expert levels. But there's nothing that I can teach you to get there. You have to put in the time. You have to go against all the other decks. And, you basically have to go through this process yourself. So just to give you guys a heads up, Gears 3, 4, and 5 will be roughly the same, where we talk about the beginner stages and now the beginner stage is very good information. Intermediate will be geared towards specific cards and specific ideas of whatever the gear is. But expert level will look like this for Gears 4 and 5, where I can only show you a deck and we can only talk about what makes it run and what makes it function. So yeah, all right. Well, I hope that helped, guys. I hope that was educational to y'all. I hope it was beneficial in some way, shape, or form. If you guys have any questions, comments, whatever, please do not hesitate to put them in the comment section below. Did I mess something up? Did I accidentally say something wrong? Please tell me. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and join the Discord if you want to hang out with us and chat on the Discord whenever you want to. And yeah, that's about it, guys. All right, until next time, peace.